The blizzard came down like judgment from the sky. One moment the Wyoming plains lay quiet under a bruised sunset, and the next they were swallowed whole by a wall of white fury. Thomas Garrett had seen storms before. He had survived drought, sickness, hunger, and 5 long winters alone. But this was different. This storm did not blow. It hunted. At 24, Thomas owned 300 acres of stubborn land that had already taken more from him than it had ever given. His parents were buried on a hill behind the ranch house, taken by fever 5 years earlier. Since then, he had lived exactly as his father taught him. Keep to yourself. Trust no one. Lock your heart tight. And Thomas had obeyed. He did not drink in Cedar Falls. He did not court the girls who smiled at church. He did not laugh at the saloon. And the other ranchers called him strange. Some called him scared. He did not care. Loneliness was safer than grief. But as the snow erased the world around him that evening, safety meant nothing. His mare Belle stumbled through drifts that rose like walls. The cattle were gone from sight. The ranch house was 3 miles back, maybe north, maybe west. In the white blindness, direction meant nothing. The wind sliced through his coat, through his skin, into his bones. Ice clung to his lashes. His hands went numb. He realized with slow dread that he might die within 50 feet of land he owned. Then Belle stopped. Through the storm, Thomas saw something impossible. A flicker of orange light against rock. Fire. He slid from the saddle and led Belle forward, fighting the wind step by step. The light came from a small shelter tucked against a stone outcrop, a teepee. Thomas froze for a different reason now. Indians. His father's voice rose in memory. Never trust them, son. Smile to your face, knife to your back. But the cold was already a knife. He stepped forward and knocked against the wooden support pole, manners clinging to him even at the edge of death. Please, he croaked. I'm caught in the storm. The flap opened. A young woman stood there, dark eyes steady, long black hair braided down her back. Behind her, another woman rose from beside the fire. Slightly older, stronger in her stance. Both wore soft buckskin dresses decorated with careful beadwork that caught the glow of the flames. They looked at him without fear, but without welcome either. He knew what they saw. A white man with a rifle at their door. My horse, he managed. We're lost. I mean no harm. The younger woman glanced at the older. They spoke softly in their own language. The older one studied Thomas a moment longer, then nodded. Come, the younger woman said in careful English. Bring horse. Relief nearly dropped him to his knees. They helped him tie Belle in the lee of the rocks. Inside, the warmth hit him like a living thing. Smoke curled upward through the opening at the top. Buffalo robes circled the small fire. The space smelled of leather and sage. He sat near the flames, shivering as feeling slowly returned to his hands and feet. The older sister handed him a cup of dark tea. Drink, she said. Pain means you live. It burned all the way down. He did not care. I'm Thomas Garrett, he said, once he could speak clearly. I have a ranch south of here. I am Mary, the younger woman replied. This my sister Sarah. The names surprised him. They saw the surprise. Mission school, Mary explained calmly. They give new names. No bitterness, just fact. They moved around him with quiet skill, hanging his coat, setting more wood on the fire. No fear in their hands, no trembling. Why help me? He asked finally. He could not finish the sentence. Sarah met his eyes directly. Storm does not care white or Apache. she said. Cold kills same. Simple words, truer than anything his father had taught him. As the night deepened, the storm roared against the hide walls. Inside, warmth wrapped around him. He found himself speaking more than he had in years. About the ranch, about burying his parents, or about eating alone at the same wooden table every night. "You have no woman?" Sarah asked bluntly. Heat rose to his face. "No." Mary's gaze softened in a way that unsettled him more than the wind outside. "You afraid?" she said gently. "Not of women, of losing." He opened his mouth to argue. He could not. They saw him, completely, and still they shared their fire. Later, when the storm finally quieted to a distant howl, Mary smiled at him in the flickering light. "A virgin rancher takes shelter with 2 Apache sisters," she said with quiet amusement. "That night changed him forever." Thomas choked on his tea. "I'm not." Sarah laughed softly. "We have eyes." Shame burned his cheeks. But it was not cruel laughter. It was warm, human. For the first time since his mother whispered to lock his heart tight, Thomas Garrett felt something crack open inside him. Not weakness, not fear. Possibility. Outside, the blizzard buried the world in white silence. Inside the small teepee tucked against stone, a lonely rancher began to thaw. Morning came soft and gray. Thomas woke to quiet. The storm that had tried to swallow him whole was gone, leaving the plains buried in clean white snow. For a moment, he did not move. The warmth around him felt too fragile to disturb. The fire had burned low, glowing red beneath pale ash. Smoke drifted gently upward. Mary sat near the entrance, sewing beadwork with steady hands. Sarah knelt beside the fire, adding wood without making a sound. They moved like people who had survived worse than storms. "You live," Sarah said, without looking at him. "I live," Thomas answered, but Mary turned slightly and studied him. "Storm pass. Your horse strong." He sat up slowly, stiffness in his back reminding him he had slept on the ground. But he had slept better than he had in years. "You should eat," Mary said. She handed him a wooden bowl filled with thick stew. It smelled of wild herbs and rabbit. He ate slowly at first, then faster. Hunger returned with strength. "You 2 alone out here?" he asked. Sarah's eyes flickered toward him. "For now," Mary answered more gently. "Our men taken to reservation. We choose not to go." The words were simple, the meaning heavy. Thomas nodded. He knew what the reservation meant. Fences, soldiers, rules written by men who had never asked permission to take land. "You could report us," Sarah said suddenly. Not accusing, just stating truth. Thomas looked at the fire. I won't." Silence filled the space, not awkward. Watching. "Why?" Mary asked. He searched for the right answer and found something he had never spoken aloud. "Because you didn't report me to the storm." Mary's lips curved in a small smile. They stepped outside after the meal. The land looked like a different world. Snow glittered under pale sun. The rock outcrop shielded the teepee perfectly from the northern wind. Thomas saw it clearly now. This was not a careless camp. It was chosen with knowledge, hidden, protected. "You built this?" he asked. "Apache women build homes," Sarah replied. Pride steady in her voice. They showed him their water source beneath thin ice, their food cache hidden in stone crevices, herbs growing in sheltered cracks. Thomas felt something shift in his thinking. His father had called them savage, and nothing about this was savage. Footprints in the snow caught Sarah's attention. Riders. 3 shapes moving slowly through the white distance. Thomas recognized the yellow coat first. Jim Henderson. His stomach tightened. "They look for survivors," he said quickly. "I'll speak to them." Sarah's jaw hardened. Mary touched her sister's arm and nodded. Thomas walked forward before the riders came too close. Snow crunched beneath boots and hooves. "Garrett!" Jim called out. "Thought you froze solid." "Found shelter," Thomas answered evenly. Pete Henderson's gaze moved past him. "Well, look at that." Dobbs rode beside them, eyes sharp and ugly. "Apache women," Dobbs muttered. "Ain't supposed to be off reservation." "They saved my life," Thomas said. Spit hit the snow. "You harboring renegades now?" "Garrett!" Thomas felt his pulse hammering in his throat. He had never stood against men like this. He avoided conflict. He avoided attention. But something inside him refused to step back. "They gave me fire," he said. "Food, shelter. Storm didn't care about race." Pete laughed. "Since when you care about women at all?" Heat rose in Thomas's chest, but it was not shame this time. "It's called decency," he answered. The word hung heavy in the cold air. Jim studied him long. Older eyes, weighing choice. "You know I should report this," Jim said quietly. "You know what happens to women sent alone," Thomas replied. Jim's jaw tightened. Long seconds passed. Then Jim looked at his son and Dobbs. "I see snow and cattle tracks. Nothing else." Pete protested, but his father's look silenced him. Dobbs glared at Thomas. "This ain't over." They rode away. Thomas did not realize he was shaking until Mary stepped beside him. "You stand," she said softly. "For what's right," he answered, though his voice trembled. They returned to the teepee. Inside, the air felt different. Not just warmth, trust. Sarah handed him tea again. This time he drank without hesitation. "You risk much," she said. "So do you," he replied. Mary sat across from him, firelight dancing in her dark eyes. "You change," she observed. Thomas looked into the flames. "I don't know what that means." "It means heart waking," she said. The words settled deep. He stayed longer than he meant to. They spoke of small things. Ranch work, winter hunts, childhood memories. He found himself laughing when Sarah teased him about his awkwardness with women. "A white man who blush like boy," she said, amused. He did blush, but he did not feel small. As afternoon light began to fade, he knew he had to leave. "I'll bring supplies," he said suddenly. "Flour, coffee, blankets." Mary's eyes searched his face. "Dangerous," she warned. "I don't care." Sarah crossed her arms. "You will care when town turns on you." Thomas thought of Cedar Falls, of whispers, of isolation he had chosen willingly. "I was alone before," he said quietly. "It wasn't living." Mary stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that he could feel warmth. "Lonely dear," she said gently. "Maybe not so lonely now." Something in his chest broke open. He mounted Belle as the sun dipped low. When he looked back, the two sisters stood side by side against white snow and dark stone. For the first time in 5 years, but Thomas Garrett did not ride toward an empty house. He rode toward a decision. That night had not just saved his body, it had awakened his heart. And hearts, once awakened, do not easily return to sleep. The town of Cedar Falls had never felt so small. 3 weeks after the blizzard, Thomas Garrett stood inside the saloon for the first time in years. Not because he wanted whiskey, not because he wanted company, but because rumors travel faster than horses, and he needed to hear them with his own ears. "They're still out there," someone muttered near the bar. Apache women hiding north of the creek. Army patrol coming next week, another voice answered. Indian agent bringing soldiers. Thomas kept his back to the wall, hat low over his eyes. He felt the words like stones striking his ribs, and he had been riding to the valley almost every day now, bringing flour, coffee, dried venison. Staying longer each time, learning their language in small pieces, listening to Mary's quiet laugh, watching Sarah move through the land like she was part of it. He had crossed a line. The town just did not know how far. "Garrett," Pete Henderson called out suddenly. "You've been riding north a lot lately." The room quieted. Thomas lifted his eyes slowly. "Checking fences." "Sure you are," Pete said with a crooked grin. Dobbs sat nearby, silent, but watching. Thomas finished his drink and left without another word. He rode hard once he was clear of town. When he reached the valley, Mary saw his face before he spoke. "Trouble," she said. "Army's coming." Sarah did not look surprised. "We knew," she said. "Well, you have to leave," Thomas insisted. "Tonight. Go west. Into the mountains." Mary shook her head. "No more running." The words stunned him. "You don't understand," he said. "They'll drag you back. Or worse." Mary stepped close, eyes steady. "You lived 5 years hiding from feeling," she said. "Was that life?" He had no answer. Before he could speak again, hoofbeats echoed from the valley entrance. Too many. Thomas grabbed his rifle. Sarah melted into the rocks above. Mary stood beside him without hesitation. 8 riders appeared through the trees. Dobbs led them. "We know you're in there, Garrett," he shouted. "Come out!" Thomas stepped forward into the open. "This land is mine," he said. "You're trespassing." Dobbs laughed. "You defending red women now?" Yes. The single word surprised even him. Well, one of the riders moved suddenly, reaching for his gun. A rifle cracked from the rocks. Sarah's shot struck the man's arm. His pistol fell into the snow. The valley erupted into tension. Then another voice rang out. "That's enough!" Jim Henderson rode into view from behind the mob. Behind him came Ruth Miller, Jorge, and 2 young men Thomas recognized from town. They had not come to attack. They had come to stand. "You boys going to murder women over rumors?" Jim demanded. "They're fugitives," Dobbs spat. "They saved my life," Thomas answered loudly. "That's the only truth here." The valley held its breath. Ruth Miller rode forward, small but fierce. "Anyone who points a gun at those girls answers to me." More men stepped from the trees. Not soldiers, neighbors. Dobbs looked around and realized the fight would not be easy, and he spat into the snow again. "This ain't over," he growled. "Maybe it is," Jim replied. One by one, the riders turned away. The valley slowly exhaled. Thomas lowered his rifle. His hands shook. Mary stepped beside him. "Not alone," she said. He looked around at the unlikely circle forming around them. Ranchers, immigrants, a widow, a man who once mocked him. Something larger than fear had taken root. That night, as the fire burned steady, Thomas sat between Mary and Sarah. "You stood," Sarah said quietly. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Fear is not weakness," Mary answered. "Choosing love over fear is strength." He looked at her in the firelight and knew the truth. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said. "Then don't," Sarah replied. The next week, the Indian agent arrived, yet he carried papers and authority and suspicion. But Thomas carried something else. Legal documents signed by a Denver lawyer. Adoption papers making Mary and Sarah his legal family. Under territorial law. The agent argued. Thomas did not bend. Mary did not lower her eyes. Sarah did not flinch. In the end, the agent left with frustration instead of prisoners. Days later, under the wide Wyoming sky, Reverend O'Brien stood in the valley. Neighbors gathered quietly. It was not a legal wedding in the eyes of the state, but it was real. "Do you choose each other?" the Reverend asked, "despite the world's opinion?" "I do," Thomas said. "I do," Mary answered. When they kissed, the valley did not tremble with gunfire. It trembled with hope. Seasons passed. The ranch changed. A schoolhouse rose near the creek. Children of every color learned together. Sarah taught them the land. Mary tended gardens that fed more than just family. Thomas was no longer the silent hermit on the hill. He was a husband, a partner, a man who had chosen connection over isolation. Years later, standing on that same hill, where he once counted cattle alone, Thomas watched his son run through tall grass while Mary called him home in both English and Apache. The wind still howled across Wyoming some nights. Storms still came, but he no longer feared them. Because once, in a blizzard that should have killed him, 2 Apache sisters had opened a flap of hide and let him in. That night had not just saved his life, it had given him one. And Thomas Garrett would never again lock his heart away.